A modern skyscraper might last a century before major repairs, yet a Roman harbor has survived 2,000 years of pounding salt water. This is the silent challenge from our ancestors, a puzzle carved in stone. We are going to explore 25 ancient structural innovations that today's architects, with all their computers and advanced materials, still cannot perfectly copy. By the end, you will understand a lost science of building that could redefine our future. How did builders without machinery create concrete that heals its own cracks? What is the secret behind stone walls that dance through earthquakes without falling? These are not just old stories. They are masterclasses in creating structures that work with nature, not against it. What does true resilience look like to you? That Roman harbor stands not as an isolated miracle, but as a testament to a forgotten way of thinking. These builders' possessions, no steel reinforcement bars, and no global supply chains. Their genius was forged from necessity, a deep and patient conversation with the world around them. They learned by doing, observing how a certain stone weathered over decades, how a specific mortar mix set in the rain, how the sun's path across a site could be harnessed or blocked. This was knowledge earned through generations, a slow accumulation of wisdom passed from master to apprentice, refined through countless trials and quiet observations. It was a hands-on science written not in equations but in the very grain of the materials they used. They understood their local limestone, their regional clay, their nearby timber, with an intimacy we have largely lost. This profound connection meant they did not fight their environment, they collaborated with it. They saw the wind not just as a force to resist, but as a tool for ventilation. They understood water flow not merely as a threat, but as a source of cooling and structural stability. Their constraints were immense, moving multi-ton stones with nothing but levers, ramps, and human ingenuity. Yet, these limitations did not stifle their ambition, they focused it. Every solution had to be elegant, efficient, and born from what was directly at hand. This is the crucial mindset we must grasp before examining any single invention. It was an intelligence of harmony rather than conquest, a philosophy of building that sought to become part of the landscape, not merely placed upon it. When we look at the specific marvels to come, remember this foundational truth. Their goal was not just to construct something that would stand, but to create something that would belong, enduring as naturally as a mountain or a river. This is why their secrets are so hard for us to replicate today. We are not just missing a formula, we are learning a different language entirely. This brings us to a vital question, one that defines our entire exploration. What does it truly mean to struggle with an ancient technique? It is not a simple matter of imitation. A modern team could, with enough time and money, assemble stones to match the exact dimensions of an ancient wall. The struggle is not in the geometry. It is in the outcome, the performance, the silent intelligence embedded within the finished form. Modern construction operates on a different set of principles, a triad of speed, cost, and standardization. We build with materials shipped from across the globe, processed in factories, and assembled on tight schedules. This system is brilliant for creating abundance, for housing millions, for shaping our contemporary world. But it often clashes with the ancient approach, which was local, bespoke, and profoundly patient. True replication would mean achieving the same legendary durability, the same passive cooling without electricity, the same graceful dance with seismic forces, using our industrialized toolkit. And that is where the puzzle becomes almost philosophical. Many attempts to recreate these marvels fall short in subtle but critical ways. A modern version of an ancient concrete might set faster and bear more immediate weight, yet it begins to degrade in a few decades, while the original remains pristine after 2 millennia. Another replica might look identical but lacks the mysterious acoustic property that made the original space sing with perfect sound. Sometimes we can analyze the chemical recipe of a mortar down to the last molecule, but we cannot replicate the specific sequence of mixing, the timing, the local water quality, or the intuitive knowledge of the master builder who knew precisely when the blend was ready. That procedural knowledge passed through hands and experience, evaporated with the culture that created it. So as we move through each innovation on our list, hold this distinction in mind. We are not just looking at old, clever tricks. We are witnessing a different paradigm of creation, one where the goal was not merely to finish a project, but to begin a legacy that would speak to the future in a language of enduring stone and silent strength. The struggle is not one of ignorance but of translation between two worlds of thought. The Pantheon in Rome does not simply stand, it breathes. Its vast dome, a perfect hemisphere of ancient concrete, has watched empires rise and fall for nearly 2,000 years, all without a single steel reinforcing bar. This is our first and perhaps most profound structural innovation, Roman self-healing concrete. While our modern bridges and seawalls crumble under the assault of salt and time, Roman harbors submerged for millennia grow stronger. The difference is not in the idea of concrete, but in its soul. The Romans used a mix of lime, volcanic ash from a region called Pozzuoli, and chunks of rock. But the true magic happened when this mix met seawater. Modern Portland cement, the backbone of our concrete, is designed to resist water. When salt water inevitably penetrates, it reacts with compounds inside, causing destructive expansion and cracking. Roman concrete invited the water in. Seawater seeping through tiny cracks would react with the volcanic ash and lime, triggering a slow, ongoing chemical conversation. This process forms rare, plate-like crystals called aluminous tobamorite. Think of these crystals as microscopic stonemasons, constantly at work. Where a crack forms, these new minerals grow, seamlessly filling the gap and welding the material back together. The concrete is not inert, it is alive in a geological sense, perpetually repairing itself. Today, material scientists are in a race to decode this ancient wisdom. Laboratories can create small samples that mimic the self-healing property, often by embedding special bacteria or capsules of healing agents into the mix. But scaling this to build a new pantheon or a harbor meant to last for ages presents a mountain of challenges. The Roman recipe was not standardized. It relied on specific, local volcanic materials and a patient, centuries-long curing process our fast-paced construction world cannot easily accommodate. We can analyze the ingredients, but we are still learning the recipe, the timing, the silent alchemy that turns simple earth and water into a material that defies time itself. This concrete does not represent a technology we have lost, but a philosophy we are still striving to understand. That resilience is not about being impervious, but about being adaptive, about designing structures that can heal. That silent alchemy of self-healing concrete speaks to a deep collaboration with time. But what about a collaboration with gravity itself? High in the Andes, the walls of Sacsayhuaman Fortress present a different kind of conversation, one held in stone without a single word of mortar. Here, massive blocks, some weighing over 100 tons, are fitted together with a precision that feels impossible. The joints are so tight, so meticulously crafted, that even a thin razor blade cannot find a gap to slip through. This is the second innovation, the breathtaking precision of Inca stone masonry. The technique is known as ashlar masonry, but that term hardly captures the artistry. Builders worked with irregular, polygonal blocks of granite, not uniform bricks. Each stone was an individual puzzle piece, shaped over countless hours to interlock perfectly with its unique neighbors. The prevailing theory of how they did this is almost meditative in its patience. It is believed masons used a process of trial and error, a stone would be lowered onto its neighbor, and the dust pattern on the lower stone would show the high points. The upper stone would then be lifted, those points carefully chipped away, and the process repeated again and again. Imagine the soundscape of that work, the constant, gentle tapping of stone on stone, the shuffling of ropes and logs, the quiet assessment of a fit improving by a fraction of an inch. This was not brute force, it was a slow, persistent dialogue between the craftsman and the material. The result is not just visual perfection, it is a seismic masterpiece. When an earthquake strikes, a rigid, mortared wall is brittle, it wants to crack. An Inca wall with its interlocking, jigsaw-like blocks is flexible. The stones can shift, sway, and settle during the tremors, dancing with the energy before calmly locking back into place. Modern engineers understand the principle, and with computer modeling and diamond-tipped tools, they can create similar polygonal walls. But the mystery lies in the scale and the intuition. How did they achieve such flawless fits on such colossal stones, moving them up mountain slopes without the wheel? The replication attempts with primitive tools struggle to match both the efficiency and the profound earthquake resistance. This leads us to a logical and awe-inspiring question. If the Inca could move 100-ton stones with such finesse, how did other cultures handle weights that were orders of magnitude greater? Moving from 100-ton stones to million-ton mountains of stone, the scale of ambition becomes almost incomprehensible. The Great Pyramid of Giza presents our third innovation, a level of precision that borders on the supernatural. Its base is a near-perfect square, level 2 within less than an inch across an area larger than 10 football fields. More astonishingly, its sides are aligned to the cardinal directions with an accuracy of just 1/15 of a degree. To grasp that, imagine aiming a laser pointer from New York to Los Angeles and missing the target city by less than the width of a single building. This was achieved over 4,500 years ago by a civilization without magnetic compasses, without advanced optics, without any of the digital tools we take for granted. How the theories are as elegant as the pyramid itself. For leveling, they may have used simple water-filled trenches, cutting a network of channels across the bedrock, filling them with water and marking a consistent height line. This humble technique, using water's unwavering search for level, could achieve near-perfect flatness across vast distances. For alignment, the leading theory points to the stars. Ancient astronomers could have used a vertical rod to track the shadow of the sun, marking its arc to find true east and west. Or they might have observed a specific circumpolar star, one that never sets, using its nightly rotation to pinpoint celestial north. This was not just construction, it was a monumental act of applied astronomy, etching humanity's understanding of the cosmos directly onto the earth. The stone cutting itself is another silent marvel. The limestone and granite blocks were shaped to fit together with joints often thinner than a credit card. This speaks to a masterful, standardized system of measurement and geometry, executed with simple copper tools and abrasive sand. Today, we achieve similar precision with satellite-guided GPS and laser levels, but these are external guides, a digital crutch. The Egyptian achievement was internalized, a profound knowledge of the sky and the land, translated into stone through generations of meticulous work. It represents a pinnacle of human observation, a testament to what the unaided eye, a disciplined mind, and a collective will can accomplish. This cosmic alignment hints at a worldview where architecture was a bridge between earth and heavens. But what of innovations that looked not to the stars, but deep into the earth itself, harnessing its hidden forces for human comfort? The quest for celestial alignment gave way to a more human-centered genius, one that understood the eye could deceive as easily as the earth could shake. Look at the Parthenon gleaming on the Acropolis. To you, it is the very definition of perfect symmetry, of straight lines and flawless proportion. Now, here is the secret. There is not a single truly straight line in the entire structure. This is our fourth innovation, the Parthenon's breathtaking optical refinements. The ancient Greeks knew a harsh truth of perception, that perfectly straight lines on a grand scale can appear to sag or bulge to the human eye. A long, flat base can look like it droops in the middle. Parallel columns can seem to splay outward, so they engineered an elegant lie, a series of subtle, intentional imperfections designed to create the illusion of perfection. The platform, or stylobate, curves upward almost imperceptibly at its center. The columns do not stand bolt upright, they all lean slightly inward, and most remarkably, each column swells gently in its middle, a delicate bulging known as intosses before tapering at the top. This was not a construction error, it was a masterstroke of applied psychology and geometry. The calculations required were staggering, a symphony of minute adjustments planned across the entire massive temple to make it appear more stable, more majestic, more alive. It was architecture that accounted for the living observer, bending stone to flatter human sight. Today, architects are fully aware of these principles. We can model such refinements with digital software in seconds, applying virtual curves to renderings. But to execute this on the scale of the Parthenon, using hand calculations, simple tools, and the judgment of the master builder's eye, is an art form we can scarcely replicate. It represents a fusion of engineering and philosophy where mathematics served beauty, and the goal was not just structural truth but perceived harmony. This manipulation of perception to achieve grandeur shows a deep understanding of the human experience of space. But what of spaces designed not just to be seen, but to be heard, where architecture itself becomes a musical instrument? Sound was not the only element ancient builders could masterfully conduct. In the searing heart of the Persian desert, they learned to conduct the wind itself. The fifth innovation is the Windcatcher or Badger, a structure of such elegant intelligence it feels like a piece of the climate itself. These tall, tower-like features rise above homes and public buildings, their open faces precisely oriented to capture the prevailing winds. But they are far more than simple chimneys. They are a complete passive cooling system. The captured breeze is funneled down a shaft, often passing over an indoor pool of water or through cool, subterranean spaces. This simple act of movement and evaporation can drop indoor temperatures by a remarkable margin, transforming a desert dwelling into a sanctuary of cool, dry air. Some designs are even more sophisticated, using the tower's shape to create a pressure differential that actively draws stale, warm air up and out of the building. This is air conditioning without a single watt of electricity, powered solely by the architecture's conversation with the environment. Modern sustainable design passionately pursues this same goal, employing thermal mass, earth berming, and complex ventilation systems. Yet, the ancient Windcatcher stands apart in its pure, localized logic. It was not a universal solution exported from a factory, but a hyper-specific response to its place, born from centuries of observing which breeze brought relief at which hour. Its elegance lies in having no moving parts, requiring no fuel, and leaving no footprint beyond its shadow. It is a lesson in biomimicry, not of a single organism, but of an entire ecosystem's logic, where a building breathes in rhythm with the land. This deep respect for natural forces extends beyond comfort and into the very foundation of stability, where builders invited the earth to move and designed structures that could follow its lead. The Windcatcher's silent breath shows architecture in conversation with the sky, but what of a structure that seems to defy the very ground it stands upon? Deep in southern India, the Lepakshi temple holds a silent, gravity-defying riddle. A massive, intricately carved stone pillar appears to support the ceiling, yet a sliver of daylight passes clearly beneath its base. This is the sixth innovation, the hanging pillar of Lepakshi. It does not rest on the floor, it floats, suspended in a state of perfect equilibrium. Local lore tells of a British engineer in the colonial era who, baffled by its construction, attempted to move it to uncover its secret. In doing so, he reportedly dislodged it just enough to break its perfect balance, proving that it was originally entirely free hanging. The pillar now stands as a testament to that lost precision, a permanent monument to a curiosity that shattered its own mystery. The question is not whether it hangs, but how. The entire pillar is a single, monolithic block of granite, covered in exquisite carvings of deities and patterns. The secret likely lies in a masterful understanding of force distribution. Experts suggest the craftsman may have carved the pillar in such a way that its center of gravity is perfectly aligned within a complex network of interlocking stone beams above. Imagine a child spinning top balanced on its point, the weight distributed so perfectly around a central axis that it stands upright. Now imagine that principle scaled to a multi-ton stone column, integrated seamlessly into a ceiling of solid rock. The pillar is not merely decorative, it is a functional part of the roof's support, yet it achieves this through a pivot point of such delicate calculation that it leaves a gap for a hand to pass underneath. Modern engineers can analyze the static forces and create computer models that show how such a balance is theoretically possible, but the replication stops at theory. The artisan's method, the sequence of carving, the exact identification of that invisible fulcrum point within a rough block of stone, all of it was guided by an intuitive, hands-on knowledge that left no blueprint. It is a structural magic trick, one that plays with our most fundamental perception of what it means to hold something up. This stone challenges a basic assumption that support must come from below. It whispers of a different logic where weight is not a burden to be borne by the earth, but a force to be orchestrated within a web of stone. That pillar's silent defiance of gravity speaks to a mastery of physical forces, but what of a mastery of something even more ephemeral, sound itself? High in the Peloponnese, the theater of Epidaurus holds a conversation with the wind, and every whisper on its stage is part of it. This is our seventh innovation, the acoustic engineering of Greek theaters. Built in the 4th century before the Common Era, its design is a marvel of auditory intelligence. An actor standing at the center of the orchestra, the circular stage, can speak in a normal, unstrained voice and be heard with perfect clarity by every one of the 14,000 spectators in the highest, most distant row. No microphone, no speaker, just stone and geometry conducting the human voice. The secret is not a single trick, but a symphony of subtle choices. The stepped limestone seats are not merely benches, they act as a giant acoustic filter. Their precise angle and rough texture naturally absorb the low-frequency rumble of the crowd, the rustle of clothing, the murmur of the wind, while simultaneously reflecting and channeling the higher frequencies of speech and song from the stage. Furthermore, the careful arrangement creates a series of diffraction and reflection patterns, gently guiding sound waves upward in a coherent wave rather than letting them scatter and dissipate. It is as if the entire hillside was sculpted to be a natural amplifier. Modern architects and acoustic engineers understand these principles, of course. They use complex computer models, specialized sound-absorbing and diffusing panels, and immense budgets to create venues with excellent acoustics. Yet, Epidaurus achieves its legendary perfection through shape and material alone, carved from the local earth with an empirical, trial-and-error mastery of how sound behaves in open air. They learned by listening, by refining the curve of a seat over generations until the space itself became an instrument. This theater does not fight its environment, it collaborates with it, using the landscape to hold and clarify human expression. It forces us to ask, if they could orchestrate sound with such elegance, what other invisible elements of our world did they learn to conduct with nothing but stone and intuition? Sound requires only air, but water possesses a far more relentless power. It can wear down mountains given enough time. The builders of Borobudur understood this, and their response was not to fight the rain, but to give it a graceful path home. This 9th century Buddhist temple in Indonesia is a mountain of stone in its own right, a stepped pyramid of 9 tiers adorned with thousands of narrative reliefs and hundreds of statues, all sitting atop a natural hill. Its 8th innovation is a masterpiece of foresight, an invisible hydraulic system woven into the very fabric of the monument. In a land of torrential tropical downpours, water is the constant architect of decay. The creators of Borobudur anticipated this. Look closely at the structure, and you will find no unsightly modern gutters or downspouts cluttering its sacred form. Instead, the water management is entirely concealed. A sophisticated network of channels, spouts, and drains was meticulously carved into the stone blocks themselves. During a storm, rainwater cascading down the stepped terraces is not allowed to simply sheet over the edges, eroding the foundations below. It is captured. Small, discrete spouts, often shaped like the mouths of mythical creatures called makara, protrude subtly from each level. They channel the water into hidden vertical drains that run down through the core of the structure, safely directing it away from the foundation and the delicate carvings. This is architecture that thinks like a watershed, transforming a potential destructive force into a managed flow. But the genius goes deeper than drainage. The entire massive weight of the temple was designed to settle. The foundation and the interlocking stone blocks were arranged with an understanding that the earth beneath would shift and compress over centuries. Rather than constructing a rigid, brittle form that would crack under its own weight as the ground moved, they created a structure with a degree of flexibility, allowing it to settle uniformly, like a great stone vessel settling into soft earth. This combination of active water management and passive structural accommodation is a holistic vision of resilience. Modern conservationists face an immense challenge here. They can analyze the drainage paths and reinforce areas, but replicating the system's seamless integration and its centuries-proven effectiveness is extraordinarily difficult. Adding modern drainage can alter the temple's appearance or even its structural behavior. The original design shows a profound patience, a plan not for years, but for millennia, where every stone served both a spiritual and a practical purpose, where the monument was built not just for people, but in a lasting truce with the very climate that surrounds it. This harmony between structure and environment raises a compelling thought. If a building can be designed to breathe with the wind and shed water like a mountain, could it also be designed to think, to react to the people within it, using nothing but shadow and light? The silent intelligence of water management gives way to a more elemental struggle, the simple, crushing weight of stone. Long before the Romans perfected the true arch with its graceful keystone, another civilization in ancient Greece was solving the same problem with a different kind of boldness. This is the 9th innovation, the Mycenaean corbelled arch and vault. Their most stunning example is the treasury of Atreus, a monumental tomb that has stood for over 3,000 years. Its entrance is a soaring corridor leading to a vast beehive-shaped chamber, all built without a single drop of mortar. The technique is called corbelling. It sounds straightforward. Each ring of stone blocks is laid so it projects slightly inward over the ring below, like a stack of plates each nudged closer to the center. Layer by patient layer, the circle closes until the final capstone seals the dome. The simplicity is deceptive. The stability of the entire structure relies entirely on gravity and friction. Each stone is held in place by the immense weight of the stones above it, pressing down and inward, creating a perfect balance of forces along invisible load paths. The builders had to calculate the angle of each inward tilt with absolute precision. Too steep and the vault would collapse inward before completion. Too shallow and the final convergence would fail. They were essentially constructing a permanent stone avalanche, frozen at the exact moment of equilibrium. Modern engineers understand the physics, but the practice is a lost art. We rarely build this way because it is incredibly labor-intensive and requires an almost prophetic understanding of how weight will settle and distribute over centuries. A single misaligned block could have meant catastrophic failure, yet the treasury of Atreus stands, a testament to a hands-on mastery of gravity itself. It represents a raw, intuitive form of structural logic, where stability was not imposed by a binding agent, but emerged from the perfect, patient stacking of one heavy thing upon another. This ancient dialogue with weight leads us to wonder what happens when that weight is not static, but is meant to move, to swing open, revealing secrets hidden for ages. The Corbelled arch speaks of a mastery over static weight, but the Romans sought to master a more elusive force, warmth itself. This is the 10th innovation, the Hypocaust system, an ancient form of central heating so advanced it would not be matched in comfort for over 1,000 years after Rome fell. In their bathhouses and the villas of the wealthy, the Romans engineered a climate of perpetual spring. The principle was one of radiant elegance. A furnace, often stoked by slaves or servants, burned continuously in a service room. But instead of letting smoke and heat wander into living spaces, they were captured and directed. The floors of the rooms above were not solid. They were raised on a grid of short, stout brick pillars, creating a hidden, hollow plenum. The walls, too, were hollow, lined with special rectangular box tiles that formed vertical channels. Hot air and gases from the furnace would rush into this carefully crafted void, flowing beneath the floors and rising through the walls, gently warming the thick tile and concrete mass from within. The heat then radiated evenly into the room, a consistent, soothing warmth without drafts, smoke, or the dry discomfort of a direct fire. Finally, the spent gases escaped through discrete terracotta flues embedded in the roof. This was not just heating, it was climate architecture. The system transformed entire buildings into low-temperature thermal batteries, storing and gently releasing heat for hours. Our modern radiant floor heating is its direct technological descendant, using pipes of hot water or electric coils. Yet, the Roman original stands apart in its rugged, almost maintenance-free durability. Built entirely from fire-resistant brick and tile, many hypocaust systems function for centuries, their hidden networks of pillars and channels silently doing their work generation after generation. To replicate this today with period materials would mean achieving that same legendary longevity, constructing a furnace and a vast subterranean airway that would never clog, crack, or require major overhaul. It illustrates an engineering philosophy where comfort was not an afterthought, but an integral, beautifully hidden system woven into the building's very bones. This pursuit of hidden comfort leads us to a different kind of hidden function, where the structure itself was designed not just to warm the body, but to guard a secret, to become a lock of monumental proportions. The hidden warmth of a hypocaust speaks to comfort engineered in secret, but another ancient innovation finds its strength not in concealment, but in proud, exposed simplicity. In southeastern Africa, the wind whispers through the empty courtyards of Great Zimbabwe, where the 11th innovation stands in silent testimony, the monumental dry stone walls of the great enclosure. These are not simple boundary markers, they are sweeping, curvilinear ribbons of granite, some soaring over 30 feet high, built entirely without a speck of mortar, lime, or any binding agent. They trace elegant, free-flowing curves and enclosures that feel organic, as if they grew from the hilltop rather than being placed upon it. This is architecture reduced to its purest elements, stone and gravity. The builders possessed an intimate, almost conversational knowledge of their material. They would select each granite block from the surrounding hills, assessing its grain and natural cleavage. Using only harder stones as hammers, they would patiently shape each piece, not into uniform bricks, but into unique forms that would lock with their neighbors. The fitting was so precise that the walls are stable, freestanding monoliths, their weight and friction alone defying centuries of wind and weather. This was not the work of a single genius, but of a community's collective effort, a shared understanding passed down through generations, where every pair of hands knew how to choose and place a stone to contribute to the whole. Today, dry stone walling is still practiced, a cherished craft for garden borders and rural fences, but the scale and ambition of Great Zimbabwe remain unmatched in the modern world. We rarely, if ever, build monumental public structures this way. The reason is one of economy and mindset. Our construction culture favors speed and standardized materials, binding everything together with concrete and steel. To replicate the great enclosure would require abandoning those tools and returning to that deep, patient material intelligence, to a philosophy where stability is earned not by adding an adhesive, but by finding the perfect, natural fit. These walls do not conquer the landscape, they complete it, a lesson in achieving permanence through harmony rather than force. That philosophy of achieving stability through perfect fit finds its ultimate expression not in resisting a force, but in dancing with it. In a land where the very ground is alive, Japan's ancient wooden pagodas have performed a silent, swaying ballet through countless earthquakes for over 1,400 years. The pagoda at Horyuji is our 12th innovation, a masterclass in earthquake-resistant design that modern engineers still study with reverence. Its secret lies in a central pillar called the shinbashira, but this pillar is a deceiver. It is not a rigid, load-bearing spine bolted to the foundation. Instead, it hangs like a massive pendulum from the top of the structure, or rests loosely on its stone base, completely unattached to the flexible wooden frame that surrounds it. When an earthquake strikes, the pagoda's multiple stories, connected by complex, interlocking wooden joints, begin to sway. The heavy central pillar, however, lags behind, swinging in the opposite direction. This creates a dynamic counterbalance, a rhythmic seesawing that absorbs and dissipates the seismic energy, preventing it from building up to a destructive crescendo. The entire building acts like a flexible tree in a storm, its wooden skeleton bending and its joints rocking, while the suspended weight at its core acts as a steadying, calming influence. This sophisticated understanding of dynamic loads and flexible joints is a direct precursor to the modern seismic base isolation systems we use today, where buildings are set on giant rubber and lead bearings to let them slide during a quake. Yet, the ancient method possesses a profound elegance that is difficult to replicate. The carpentry joinery is an art form in itself, involving hundreds of precisely carved wooden brackets and beams that fit together without nails, allowing for controlled movement. The balance of the entire structure, the intuition behind the pillars' exact weight and suspension, was knowledge passed down through generations of master builders. Modern engineering, with its reliance on steel reinforcement and concrete, approaches the problem from a different angle, often prioritizing rigidity with added dampers. To build a new pagoda using only the original principles would require not just a different set of blueprints, but a different mindset, one that sees flexibility as the highest form of strength. These pagodas do not stand against the trembling earth, they listen to its rhythm and move in time, a testament to building with grace under pressure. Flexibility in the face of tremors is one kind of wisdom, but resilience against a far slower, more patient enemy requires another. The sprawling, sun-baked ruins of Chan Chan in Peru hold a secret to longevity written not in stone but in mud. This is the 13th innovation, the sun-dried adobe of the Chimu civilization. In a stark coastal desert, where rain is a rare but catastrophic event, they built the largest pre-Columbian city in the Americas entirely from earth, and its core structures have endured for over 600 years. Their achievement defies every modern assumption about a humble material. It was not mere mud slapped into bricks. the longevity sprang from a profound, localized recipe. The clay was mixed with precise additives, often crushed seashells or gravel, which acted as a natural stabilizer, reducing shrinkage and cracking as the bricks dried. But the true genius was architectural. The builders understood their enemy was not the constant sun, but the occasional, torrential downpour, so they designed with a defensive elegance. Walls were crowned with protective cornices and wide overhangs like stone eyebrows to shield the vulnerable adobe from direct rainfall. Intricate drainage channels were carved into plazas and integrated into walls, swiftly directing any water away from the foundations. The entire city was a system for shedding moisture, a fortress built against the exception rather than the rule. Modern adobe construction, while enjoying a revival for its sustainability, often struggles to match this ancient durability. We can analyze the shells in the mix, but the exact proportions, the specific local clay sources, and the intuitive knowledge of how each batch would behave are fragments of a lost conversation. We might replicate the brick, but we often miss the holistic design, the way every eave and channel worked in concert to preserve the whole. Chan Chan teaches a quiet lesson that the simplest materials, when understood with deep intimacy and paired with thoughtful design, can achieve a permanence that rivals the mightiest stone. It proves that true innovation is not always about inventing a new substance, but about listening to an old one with perfect attention. This intimate knowledge of Earth leads to a logical question. What happens when that knowledge is applied not to building on the ground, but to shaping the ground itself, to carving a city not upward, but directly into the living rock? Carving a city from living rock demonstrates a profound unity with the earth, but what of shaping the earth itself into forms of impossible geometry? Scattered across the Diquis Delta of Costa Rica, resting in jungle clearings and riverbeds, lie hundreds of stone spheres so flawless they seem dropped by another world. This is our 14th innovation, the nearly perfect stone spheres of the Diquis culture. Ranging from the size of a grapefruit to colossal orbs over 8 feet in diameter and weighing more than 15 tons, these objects present a quiet, persistent riddle. Their purpose remains one of archaeology's gentle debates, with theories suggesting they were astronomical markers, symbols of status, or sacred representations of celestial bodies. But it is their physical perfection, not their purpose, that whispers of a lost skill. Using only stone tools, artisans achieved a sphericity and surface smoothness that challenges measurement. The process is understood in theory, a patient sequence of pecking the rough form from granite or gabbro with a harder stone, then grinding it smooth with sand and water over what must have been years. Some suggest the use of controlled heat or sudden cooling to spall off large sections, a technique of thermal shock, yet the mystery deepens with consistency. How did they maintain such precise curvature across hundreds of spheres, of vastly different sizes, without a standard template or measuring device? The uniformity suggests a shared, rigorous knowledge passed between craftsmen, a communal standard of perfection held in the mind and the hand. A modern machine shop could produce an identical sphere in an afternoon with computer-guided lathes, but that is not the point of the challenge. The enigma is in the why and the how of the ancient method. Replicating the feat with only period-accurate tools would be an act of immense, devoted labor, a project spanning lifetimes for a result that has no clear utilitarian function. It does not hold up a roof, channel water, or mark a boundary in any obvious way. This highlights a priority almost foreign to our efficiency-driven world, the immense cultural value placed on the creation of perfect form for its own sake, or for a meaning we can only glimpse. These spheres are a testament to a different kind of engineering, one where the goal was not merely utility, but the material expression of an ideal, a dialogue with geometry made permanent in stone. That pursuit of perfect form finds its most breathtaking expression not in solitary spheres, but in forests of stone that reach for the heavens. The vaulted ceilings of Gothic cathedrals are our 15th innovation, a stone lacework that seems to float on light itself. This was not magic, but a radical new grammar of architecture, a masterclass in redirecting weight. The secret lay in a brilliant trio: the pointed arch, the ribbed vault, and the flying buttress. The rounded Roman arch pushes weight outward and down, demanding thick, windowless walls to contain the thrust. The Gothic pointed arch, however, channels that force more directly downward. This allowed builders to replace solid walls with vast expanses of stained glass, filling the space with colored light, but the stone ceiling still wanted to push outward. So they invented external skeletons, the flying buttresses, those graceful stone arms that leap from the walls to massive external piers. They catch the outward thrust of the vault and channel it safely into the ground, like a friend steadying someone leaning out a window. Every block in this system was a custom-cut piece of a three-dimensional puzzle, carved by masons following wooden templates, each one essential to the integrity of the whole. The mortar between them was simple lime, setting slowly, allowing the entire structure to settle and find its balance over decades. We understand the physics perfectly today. We can model the load paths with digital precision. But to actually build a Chartres or a Notre Dame from scratch using only medieval methods would be a task of almost unimaginable scale and patience. It would require reviving the guild system, the hand carving of thousands of unique stones, the construction of vast timber scaffolding, and a workforce committed to a project that would outlive every single one of them. This represents a fusion of faith and physics, where artistic vision and empirical structural knowledge were inseparable, executed over generations with a collective purpose. Our modern, project-based industry is simply not configured to replicate. It was architecture as a lifelong conversation with gravity and light. The Gothic cathedral's reach for the heavens finds its mirror image in a descent into the earth, a retreat not from faith but from threat. In the heart of Cappadocia, the landscape itself became a sanctuary, carved into a labyrinth of survival. This is our 16th innovation, the subterranean cities of Cappadocia. These are not simple caves or isolated dwellings, but vast, multi-level metropolises excavated entirely by hand into the region's soft, malleable volcanic rock, known as tuff. At their peak, they could shelter thousands of people for months at a time, complete with living quarters, stables, churches, wineries, and communal kitchens, all stacked vertically, descending as many as 18 levels deep into the darkness. The sheer scale of excavation is staggering, but the true genius lies in the life support systems engineered within the stone. Fresh air was the paramount concern. Ingenious ventilation shafts, some stretching over 300 feet to the surface, were drilled with astonishing precision. These were not mere holes, they were carefully calculated to exploit differences in air temperature and density, creating a passive, continuous circulation that swept stale air out and drew fresh air down, making the deepest chambers breathable. Security was engineered with equal cleverness. Passageways could be sealed in an instant by massive, circular stone doors, often weighing several hundred pounds. These slabs, shaped like millstones, would roll into grooves carved into the tunnel walls, effectively locking entire sections of the city from the inside. Water management, too, was seamlessly integrated. Deep, protected wells tapped into underground aquifers, while a network of carved channels and collection basins ensured a sustainable supply and managed waste, all without contaminating the living spaces. This was urban planning in its most elemental and defensive form, a masterclass in understanding geology, fluid dynamics, and human psychology under pressure. Modern engineers can, of course, build deeper and larger underground complexes using tunnel boring machines and reinforced concrete, but the challenge of replication lies in the ancient holistic vision. to carve a self-sustaining, climate-controlled city for thousands, using only hand tools with no blueprints beyond communal knowledge, and to engineer its systems to function perfectly for centuries without mechanical intervention, represents a zenith of adaptive design. It was architecture as a direct response to necessity, transforming the very earth into both a shield and a home, a lesson in resilience written not on the landscape but within it. That descent into the earth speaks of a community's collective effort for survival, but on a remote Pacific island, another kind of collective effort was directed toward a far more visible and enduring goal. Isolated in the vastness of the ocean, Easter Island is a landscape of silent, watchful giants. The massive stone moai, their gaze fixed inland, represent our 17th innovation, a logistical puzzle that has echoed for centuries. How did the Rapa Nui people, with a population never exceeding a few thousand and no access to metal or large animals, transport these colossal figures, some weighing over 80 tons, from the quarry to ceremonial platforms miles away across rugged, rolling hills? The mystery is not in the carving but in the journey. For a long time, the prevailing theory involved laying the statues on wooden sledges and pulling them over log rollers, a method that would have consumed vast quantities of the island's precious timber. But recent experimental archaeology has proposed a far more dynamic and daring possibility, that the islanders made the statues walk. In this theory, teams used a complex system of ropes tied to the statue's head and base. By pulling in a rhythmic, coordinated fashion, they could rock the moai from side to side, pivoting it on its curved belly. With each controlled tilt and swing, the giant would inch forward, appearing to march upright across the landscape. This method would require not just brute strength, but an almost musical sense of coordination and an intimate, tactile knowledge of each statue's unique center of gravity. One misstep, one pull out of rhythm, and the multi-ton figure could topple, perhaps cracking beyond repair. The idea transforms the act of transport from a slow grind into a communal ritual of balance and motion. Modern engineering could, of course, move these masses with ease, using cranes, hydraulic trailers, and steel cables. The true struggle lies in validating the ancient method itself. Experimental attempts to walk a moai have seen mixed results, with some achieving short distances and others highlighting the extreme risk and difficulty. To fully replicate the feat at the true scale, moving an 80-ton statue miles to its final site using only ropes, human power, and oral knowledge remains an unproven and deeply controversial challenge. It speaks to a form of lost knowledge that was not written down, but lived in the muscles and timing of a community, a shared logistical intelligence that turned an island into a workshop for giants. This silent procession of stone figures across the hills leads us to wonder, if a culture could orchestrate such a delicate ballet with massive weight, what other forms of communal coordination shaped the ancient world, perhaps even turning entire populations into living machines for a grander vision. The silent march of the moai speaks to a mastery of moving weight, but for the Maya, the greater challenge was not moving through the landscape, but preserving life within it. In the dense, waterless heart of the Guatemalan rainforest, the great city of Tikal flourished for centuries. Its survival hinged on a hidden innovation, a marriage of stone and sap that held the lifeblood of the city secure. This is our 18th innovation, the hydraulic cement of the Maya. In a climate where 9 months of drought could be broken by torrential downpours, storing clean water was a matter of civilizational life and death. The Maya engineered vast, plaster-lined reservoirs, but their true genius was in the binder that made those linings hold. They created a cement that could set and cure even underwater, a vital property for sealing reservoirs from the inside out. The process began with limestone, burned in kilns at carefully controlled temperatures to produce quicklime. But then they introduced a secret ingredient, the sap or latex from local trees such as the sapodilla. This organic additive was not a random choice, it was a stroke of biochemical insight. When mixed into the cement, the tree sap likely acted as a natural plasticizer and waterproofing agent. On a chemical level, the organic compounds could have slowed the setting process, reduced shrinkage cracks, and created a more flexible, less brittle final product that could better withstand the constant cycles of wet and dry, and the subtle movements of the earth beneath the reservoirs. This gave their cement a resilience specifically tailored to the brutal demands of the tropical environment. Modern Portland cement, for all its immense compressive strength, is comparatively rigid and vulnerable to the very moisture the Maya cement was designed to defy. In our reservoirs and seawalls, we fight water with impermeable barriers that can crack under stress. The Maya invited it in with a material that could accommodate it. Today, material scientists searching for more sustainable, green concrete look to the Maya formula with great interest. Their recipe was hyper-local, using readily available materials, and its potential biodegradability and lower production temperature point toward a smaller carbon footprint. The struggle lies in the lost nuances. We know the ingredients, limestone and tree sap, but the exact species of tree, the precise ratio of sap to lime, the specific burning temperature of the limestone, and the meticulous mixing sequence are fragments of a lost practice. It represents a sustainable material science born from intimate observation, where the solution to a civilization's greatest threat was found in the very forest that surrounded it. This deep, localized intelligence makes us look at the landscape itself with new eyes, to wonder what other forgotten conversations between people and plants might hold the key to building in harmony with our world. The Maya cement reveals a truth that survival often meant listening to the forest, but in the arid plains of Western India, survival required listening to the silence of the earth itself, waiting for the whisper of hidden water. Here, architecture did not reach for the sky but descended gracefully into the ground, creating spaces of profound beauty from pure necessity. The 19th innovation is the Indian stepwell, or Baoli, a monumental inverted temple carved into the earth. These are not mere wells, they are breathtaking feats of civic engineering, designed to access a fluctuating water table in regions where rain was a fleeting, precious gift. Their genius is in their form, a series of symmetrical, stepped corridors that descend dozens of stories, sometimes over 100 feet deep, to a reservoir at the bottom. As the water level rose and fell with the seasons, the steps ensured there was always a path to reach it, but a stepwell was far more than a water source. It was a cool, subterranean oasis, a social hub, and a place of quiet reflection. The descent created a natural microclimate, with the temperature dropping significantly with each level, offering respite from the blistering heat above. The walls were lined with intricate carvings, pillared pavilions, and shaded galleries where communities would gather, turning a utilitarian structure into a masterpiece of public space. This was hydrogeology expressed as art, a perfect marriage of masonry and intuition. Every stone was laid to manage water through gravity alone, with channels and drains directing every precious drop into the central tank, all built to last for centuries with almost no maintenance. Our modern water infrastructure, by contrast, is largely hidden, mechanical, and single-purpose, a network of pipes and pumps buried out of sight. To replicate a stepwell today would mean designing a public utility that is also a breathtaking architectural landmark, a system that cools as it collects, that fosters community as it conserves, and that operates for lifetimes without a single moving part or watt of electricity. It represents a lost philosophy of public works, where the most vital civic function was also the heart of cultural and social life, an enduring lesson in how to build not just for need, but for the human spirit. The stepwell's descent into the earth reveals a dialogue with hidden water, but high on the arid plains of southern Peru, another ancient conversation is written on such a vast scale it can only be seen from the sky. The Nazca lines are not a structural innovation in the traditional sense. They do not hold up a roof or channel a river. Their 20th innovation is one of profound environmental foresight, a mastery of surface preservation. These colossal geoglyphs depicting spiders, hummingbirds, and geometric shapes are essentially shallow scratches on the desert floor, created by simply removing the top layer of dark, sun-oxidized stones to reveal the lighter-colored soil beneath. They are fragile, mere inches deep, and yet they have survived for over 2,000 years in a landscape that seems brutally exposed. This longevity is no accident. It is the result of the Nazca people's intimate, almost prophetic understanding of their unique microclimate. They chose a canvas of extraordinary stability. The Nazca Desert is one of the driest places on Earth, with rain falling perhaps once a decade. The air is remarkably still, with winds so calm they cannot stir the stones. Furthermore, the surface itself cooperated. Over time, the sun and minerals had formed a hard, protective crust called desert pavement, locking the remaining stones in place and preventing the lighter subsoil from being blown or washed away. The artists were not just drawing, they were performing a delicate subtraction on a surface they knew would hold the memory of their work. Today, we could certainly scrape new lines into that desert. Modern technology could map and execute designs with even greater precision. But what we cannot replicate is the ancient certainty, the deep cultural knowledge that allowed them to begin a project knowing, with confidence, that their art would speak to the sky for countless generations. They were not creating for themselves or even for their children, but for a future so distant it was almost mythological. This represents a different kind of architectural thinking, where the structure is not a building, but a mark upon the world, and its integrity depends entirely on a perfect, patient understanding of the land's own quiet rules. It forces a humbling question in our era of rapid change and planned obsolescence. Do we possess the wisdom to create anything we are certain will endure for 2,000 years? The Nazca lines trusted the desert stillness to preserve their message, but the Roman Empire built a network meant to carry its voice across continents. The 21st innovation is the Roman road, a system engineered not for decades but for millennia. These were not mere dirt tracks, they were multi-layered masterpieces of civil engineering, designed with a singular philosophy: permanence. The process began with a deep trench dug down to stable ground. Into this, a foundation layer of large stones was carefully laid, creating a solid, unyielding base. Upon this came the heart of the road, a thick middle layer of smaller stones, gravel, and sand, all bound together with lime mortar or clay. Finally, the crowning glory, a surface of interlocking polygonal paving stones, expertly fitted together and cambered, meaning they were slightly arched to shed rainwater efficiently into drainage ditches on either side. This was a road designed to think for itself, to shed water before it could seep in and weaken the foundation. The materials themselves were chosen for their ability to compact and bond over time, growing stronger under the weight of traffic rather than fracturing. The result is a legacy that literally underpins modern Europe, with some stretches still carrying local traffic after 2,000 years. Our modern asphalt roads, by contrast, are marvels of speed and efficiency, laid in days to connect a rapidly moving world. Yet they are inherently temporary, requiring constant resurfacing and repair as they crack and rot under stress and weather. The Roman method presents a quiet challenge to our modern priorities. To truly replicate it today, stone by patient stone, would be prohibitively slow and staggeringly expensive in a world that demands immediate connectivity. But its endurance speaks to a different value system, one that viewed infrastructure not as a disposable expense, but as a permanent gift to the future, a stone spine upon which civilization could securely stand. This philosophy of building for the ages, of investing in permanence, forces us to look upward, to consider where else this mindset might be applied, not just across the land, but reaching toward the sky itself. The Roman road's stone spine was built to conquer distance, but in the frozen north, another material was mastered to conquer time itself. In the deep forests of medieval Norway, master builders created sanctuaries that seemed to grow from the earth, using a language spoken only in wood. This is the 22nd innovation, the timber framing of Norwegian stave churches. These are not simple log cabins. They are intricate, towering structures assembled with a breathtakingly complex system of interlocking joinery, using not a single nail. The entire building, from its soaring central mast to its steep, sheltering roof, is held together by a three-dimensional wooden puzzle. Each joint, whether a mortise and tenon, a dovetail, or a uniquely carved scarf, was cut with such precision that the friction and interlock alone create a structure of immense strength. This was carpentry raised to the level of sacred geometry. But the true genius of these churches is not just in their assembly, it is in their conversation with a harsh climate. Norway's seasons swing from deep freeze to thaw, a cycle that can crack stone and heave foundations. The stave church was designed not to resist this movement, but to participate in it. The entire frame has a calculated flexibility, allowing the structure to breathe, shift, and settle with the freezing and thawing ground without splitting or failing. This dynamic stability prevented moisture from being trapped, a key defense against the relentless enemy of wooden buildings, rot. Further protection came from a primal recipe. The wood was liberally treated with tar, a preservative harvested from the very pine trees that supplied the timber. This created a building that was essentially self-lubricating and waterproofed, a cohesive system from forest to final form. Modern timber framing is a respected craft, and we can certainly build strong wooden structures with metal fasteners and engineered lumber. Yet the specific, holistic wisdom of the stave church is a fading echo. The knowledge is preserved in the few surviving examples themselves, like the Borobudur stave church, which has stood for over 800 years. To replicate it would mean reviving not just the joinery cuts, but the intuitive understanding of how each piece of timber would season and move over centuries, and designing the entire building as a flexible, organic response to its environment. It represents a pinnacle of wooden architectural intelligence, where the builder's skill was in predicting and accommodating the lifelong dance of the material. This deep symbiosis with wood leads us to a final, profound question. If ancient builders could achieve such harmony with stone, earth, and timber, what fundamental principle did they understand that our modern world, for all its power, is still striving to relearn? That deep symbiosis with wood speaks of a harmony with the seasons, but in the heart of the Persian desert, another culture mastered a far more delicate balance, preserving winter's touch through the blistering summer. The 23rd innovation is the yakchul, the ancient Persian ice house. In a landscape where midday heat could be punishing, these domed structures, rising from the sand like giant clay beehives, held a secret chill. They were not just cellars, they were complete passive refrigeration systems, engineered to create and maintain a stable, below-freezing microclimate without a single moving part. The process began in the cold desert nights of winter. Ice harvested from nearby mountains or from shallow pools that froze overnight was brought to the yakchul. But the true genius was in the storage. The structure itself was the machine. Its thick walls were made from a special insulating mortar called saruj, a mix of clay, sand, ash, and often goat hair or egg whites, which dried to a hard, water-resistant shell. This shell was wrapped around a deep, underground storage pit. Atop the dome, a windcatcher or badger stood sentinel, its open face perfectly aligned to catch the cool night breezes. This funneled cold air down into the pit where the ice was stacked. The heavy, cold air would settle at the bottom, while any warmer air rose and was vented out. The design was a perfect thermal trap, a collaboration between architecture and climate. the thick walls insulated against the sun's heat by day, while the Windcatcher actively pumped in coolness by night, maintaining a year-round winter inside. This allowed communities to store not just ice but perishable food, a revolutionary advantage in a harsh environment. Our modern refrigeration is a marvel of instant, on-demand cooling, but it is entirely dependent on a constant supply of electricity. The actual represents a different ideal, a system of elegant resilience that asks nothing of the world but the wind and the shade. Sustainable architects today look to these structures with immense respect, striving to replicate their zero-energy efficiency. We can build similar-shaped structures, but the true replication lies in achieving that same legendary performance, creating a space that stays frozen through a desert summer using only local earth, clever orientation, and an ancient, patient understanding of thermodynamics. It is a reminder that sometimes the most advanced technology is not about adding complexity, but about perfecting a simple, profound conversation with the elements. The actual silent conversation with the desert climate finds a stunning parallel where the land itself is the sea. For the communities of the Maldives, the ocean was not just a source of life, but the very quarry from which they built their world. The 24th innovation is the coral stone architecture of the Maldives, a method of construction born from a profound intimacy with the living reef. Historic mosques and structures across the islands were not built from imported timber or fired brick, but from porous coral, a specific species harvested directly from the underwater gardens that surrounded them. The process was a masterclass in sustainable, localized building. Divers would carefully cut massive blocks from the living reef, a task requiring immense skill and respect, knowing exactly how much could be taken without triggering a collapse of the entire ecosystem. This was not mining, it was a form of delicate cultivation. The magic, however, happened above the waves, when the wet, porous coral blocks were hauled from the water and exposed to the air, a chemical transformation began. The blocks would slowly harden, curing into a remarkably durable stone that could be precisely carved and fitted. The resulting buildings, like the ancient Friday Mosque in Malay, possess a serene, organic beauty, their walls composed of fossilized sea life. But their genius is more than aesthetic. Coral stone is naturally insulating, keeping interiors cool under the tropical sun, and it is inherently resistant to the corrosive salt air that swiftly decays imported metals and standard concrete. This was architecture that emerged directly from its environment, using a material that was abundant, perfectly adapted, and required no long-distance transport. Today, modern construction on these same islands often relies on importing steel, concrete, and other materials at great financial and environmental cost, a process that generates a significant carbon footprint. The old way presents a quiet, profound challenge. To truly replicate it now is fraught with difficulty. First, we recognize the ecological sensitivity. Harvesting coral on any scale today would be unthinkable given our understanding of fragile reef ecosystems. Second, the specialized artisanal knowledge, the intuitive sense of which coral to cut, how to season it, and how to build with its unique texture, has largely faded with time. This innovation stands as a testament to a closed loop of creation, where communities built their sacred and civic spaces from the sea that sustained them, achieving resilience not through conquest of their environment, but through a graceful and sustainable partnership with it. This brings us to the final, overarching question that has shadowed every marvel on our list, from self-healing concrete to walking statues. Across the world, from the jungles of Cambodia to the highlands of the Andes, ancient stone bears the same silent signature. At Angkor Wat, at Ollantaytambo, at sites separated by oceans, you find the same solution, metal clamps locking giant stones together. This is the 25th innovation, and it presents a puzzle not of a single culture, but of a shared structural intuition. Builders carved precise dovetail or eye-shaped channels into the faces of adjoining stone blocks. Then they poured molten iron or bronze directly into these grooves. As the metal cooled and contracted, it fused with the stone, creating a hidden, monolithic bond that was far stronger than the stone itself. This was not a simple bracket, it was a liquid joint, a permanent weld executed on a monumental scale. The technical skill is astonishing, requiring precise control of high-temperature metal casting in the field, often on vertical surfaces, but the deeper mystery is why. What problem were these clamps solving? Some researchers point to seismic activity, suggesting the metal allowed the stones to flex slightly during tremors without sliding apart. Others propose a more practical role in construction, that the clamps served as perfect alignment guides, holding blocks in precise position as the walls rose before the final courses locked everything into place. There is also the possibility of a deeper meaning, that the act of pouring molten metal, a transformative and powerful process, held a ritual significance, permanently sealing not just stone, but perhaps intention, into the fabric of a sacred site. Modern construction has its own version, of course. We embed steel rebar within concrete to give it tensile strength, but that is a reinforcement of a composite material. The ancient technique is different. It is a joining technology for discrete, massive elements. We could replicate the act today with thermite or specialized foundry equipment, but we would be applying a modern industrial process to mimic an ancient artisanal one. The true replication would be to understand the moment of decision, to know with certainty why a master builder at Inca and another at a pre-Inca fortress, worlds apart, looked at their colossal stones and reached for the same tool, a crucible of liquid metal. It suggests a universal language of structural problem-solving, a convergent evolution of engineering minds arriving at an elegant, powerful answer to the same timeless question: how do you make separate things become one forever? These common threads weave a clear and humbling pattern. Our struggle to replicate these ancient marvels is not a failure of intelligence, but a mismatch of values. We possess vastly more knowledge, but theirs was knowledge of a different kind, deep, slow, and rooted in place. They practiced a form of hyper-local material science, not in laboratories, but in a lifelong dialogue with their surroundings. A Roman engineer knew his volcanic ash from Pozzuoli with the same intimacy a baker knows his flour, understanding not just its composition, but its behavior in the rain, its cure under the sun, its conversation with seawater over 100 years. This was science written in the language of experience, passed hand to hand, impossible to fully capture in a modern chemical analysis. We can identify the ingredients, but we miss the recipe's timing, the artisan's touch, the specific water from a local spring that made the mix just right. Their methods were equally inseparable from their culture. The Inca trial and error fitting of massive stones, the generational labor on a Gothic cathedral, the communal rhythm of walking a moe, these were time-intensive, artisanal processes supported by social and economic models that saw such projects as a collective legacy. Our world is built on different imperatives: speed, efficiency, and cost. We prioritize projects that can be completed within a budget cycle, using standardized materials shipped from anywhere, assembled by a transient workforce. The ancient model of a community investing its lifetime into a single, enduring structure is a philosophical foreign land to our globalized, fast-paced economy. We have traded the certainty of centuries for the convenience of now. Perhaps the most profound gap is one of holistic vision. Ancient builders rarely saw a wall as just a wall, or a roof as just a roof. A structure was a complete system, a mediator between humanity and the world. The Parthenon's curves corrected for human sight. The Windcatcher married architecture to meteorology. The pagoda's central pillar was a seismic dance partner, Spirituality, acoustics, climate control, and structural integrity were not separate disciplines to be coordinated by different consultants. They were interlocking facets of a single sacred and practical whole. Modern engineering, for all its brilliance, often operates in silos, with structural, mechanical, and architectural teams working on parallel tracks, sometimes struggling to achieve that seamless, systemic harmony that came naturally to the master builder who held all those truths in one mind. Ultimately, these innovations whisper a question about time itself. They were built for permanence, for a timescale that stretched toward eternity. Their makers laid stones knowing they would never see the finished work, trusting that their children's children would benefit. We live in an age of planned obsolescence and rapid renewal, where a building's lifespan is often measured in decades, not millennia. Our struggle to replicate is, at its heart, a struggle to adopt that long-now perspective, to value legacy over immediacy in a world that constantly shouts for the next new thing. This reveals the true nature of the puzzle. It is not merely a technical challenge to be solved with better tools, but a philosophical invitation to reconsider what we build, why we build it, and who we are building it for. This silent conversation across centuries leaves us not with a feeling of loss, but with a powerful invitation. Our journey through these 25 ancient marvels reveals a profound truth. Our ancestors were not primitive, but masters of their environment, wielding a deep, intuitive science that we are only beginning to decode with our instruments. They understood their materials with an intimacy that came from a lifetime of observation, not a laboratory report. They saw the world as a partner, not a resource to be dominated. Each structure we have explored, from the self-healing Roman harbors to the walking moe, from the whispering theaters to the breathing pagodas, stands as a testament to a different way of thinking. These are not mere historical curiosities gathering dust in textbooks. They are active benchmarks of sustainability, resilience, and harmonious design that quietly challenge our current paradigms. They ask us to consider not just how to build, but why and for how long. In our race for the new, we have often forgotten the wisdom of the enduring. We construct with materials designed to last a few decades, while they built with the ambition of millennia, seeing their work as a gift to a future they would never see. As we now face global challenges like climate change and resource scarcity, the path forward may require looking backward with new eyes. The solutions we desperately seek might not lie only in the untested technologies of tomorrow, but in these silent, enduring lessons from the past. They teach us that true innovation is not always about inventing something from nothing, but about listening deeply to the world around us, understanding its rhythms, and designing in concert with them. It is a call to build not just for ourselves, but for the generations yet to come, to create legacies of stone, earth, and wisdom that will speak long after we are gone. So we turn the question to you: which of these ancient techniques do you find most astonishing? Was it the concrete that heals itself, the stones that walk, or the pillars that float? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this exploration of lost engineering, of the quiet genius etched into our world, subscribe for more journeys into the mysteries of history.